some pictures off the interweb. I was pretty proud of myself. Took me longer than it should have. But, you know, I did special for you. You like that. So here's the deal. We are going to be in the book of Esther. I want to give you kind of the DL of what's going on tonight. And here's the thing. I don't require much, but the requirement is you must have a noisemaker and you must use it, or you'll promptly be removed from service via a very large individual. So today, and one of the things that we like to do is celebrate the Feast of Purim, really kind of recognizing that Jewish history is Christian history, that we are uniquely grafted into the line of Abraham, that all of these things are beautiful reminders of what God has done in the past and what and really a story of redemption of what he's going to do in the future. And so we like to celebrate periodically some of the Jewish holidays, and Purim or Purim, if you're actually Jewish. If you're a Gentile, it's Purim. We don't care. We like this. It's a good overview of the book of Esther. It's a really fun thing to do. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to give you instructions and talk about how we're going to run this thing, and then we're going to jump in and go crazy. You guys game? Awesome. Father, thank you so much for beautiful day. Different service times. Thank you for everybody who remembered. We pray for those who have completely forgotten and will show up in about 2 hours. Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity of celebrating things like Purim and just being able to remember your greatness, remember what you've done, how you interact with humanity, how you purposely place us where we are at to do your will and give us the ability to act. Lord, I ask that this would be a good time of celebration, a good time of just being fun as a church, and ultimately, Lord, that we would constantly be reminded of your glory. So we thank you for this. In your name, amen. So here's the deal. The Feast of Purim, this is Epicenter's take on this particular feast. And the reason why I say Epicenter's take is I've never actually been to a synagogue where they've celebrated it, so I'm not completely sure. I'm not a rabbi, so that kind of ruins most of it. And also, I was reading as we were studying up, and every year I try to find new ways to celebrate this thing. I was reading one rabbi's interpretation, and he said that you should drink so much libation, alcohol, that you can't tell the difference between Haman and Esther. And I thought, we shouldn't do that. So let's do our way. We have plenty of free coffee and tea. Drink so much coffee you can't tell the difference because you're just buzzed on caffeine. But what we really like to do is bring in these noisemakers. They're actually called groggers. I don't know why they're called groggers, but it's a cool name, so I made a sign and put groggers on it. And this is what we're going to do. Anytime that you hear the name Haman, you're going to boo. So let's, beautiful. Haman's the bad guy. I mean, we'll pick that up. I said it again. Oh my gosh. Anytime you hear the name Mordecai, you're going to cheer and use your noisemakers. Mordecai is the uncle. And part of the book, he gets a little creepy. We're going to talk about that. But he's the good guy. He's an awesome guy. And then anytime that you hear Esther, and your noisemakers. Beautiful. So here's the catch with this. Usually when I guess not when I go to church, because I make a lot of noise when I go to church. Usually when you go to church, you kind of walk in and some guy's up there talking. Most of the time here it's me. And you're just really hoping that it's not going to be boring, that it's going to be like correct or not complete heresy, just partially heresy. And you don't really get to participate a lot. This is your opportunity to be absolutely obnoxious in church. You get one shot, one opportunity. I'm not going to say the rest. Mama spaghetti. Anyway, so we're going to give this a try, and then we'll divide up the book and then get cracking. So I'm going to throw out some names, and you give me the appropriate response. Esther. Haman. Esther. Mordecai. Jesus. I feel like you broke the rules, but I'm going to accept that. A-. I mean, if you You kind of have to cheer for Jesus. So we're going to divide this book into three large sections, three feasts. The first section will be the Feast of Kings, and that's chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 18. The second section are the Feasts of Esther, and that's chapter 2, 19 through chapter 7, verse 10. And lastly, the Feast of Purim, which is chapter 7, verse 11 through chapter 10, verse 3. Actually, chapter 10 only has 3 verses. So that's a good place to start memorizing the Bible if you really feel like you need to do that. Is your hand up? You can make noise during the whole thing. And someone would say no. I mean, only when I say those names. You can't just be like making noise, like, be quiet, man. See, like that. You can't do that. So let's start. If you have your Bibles, open your Bibles to Esther, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. If you got it, say, I've got it. Man, you guys got it quick. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So the author of this book is giving us kind of some background. You notice how I avoided saying the name of the book. Is giving us some background and setting the stage for what's going to happen. And he introduces for us the first character, King Ahasuerus. We would better know him today as Xerxes the First. Xerxes was about to enter into war, and he was going to expand his territory. Already he's reigning over multiple countries, but he wants more. And so he throws a party for 180 days, which is a beast of a party. And he's throwing this to celebrate his future victories and to kind of gather his troops and leaders and get them ready to enter into this. So this party was preparation for 2 specific battles. The battle at Thermopylae, which you guys saw in what movie? Do you guys remember? 300. No. Well, yes. Sparta 300. Which he won. Totally womped it. Great movie. In that movie, he's kind of a creeper. I don't really expect him to look like that, or I have expected him to look like that. But he definitely won that battle. And then he went on to fight a naval battle called Salamis, which he lost. Anyway, so Xerxes comes in and he's throwing this huge party, this super party, and he gets just super drunk. I mean, really, really, really wasted. And basically everybody at the party is wasted. He likes to drink. He wants to get his troops excited and boost morale and get people on his side. So he's kind of working the political system of his day. And when he gets drunk and everybody else gets drunk, he thinks about his queen. And his queen is partying with the ladies and he's partying with the dudes. And he decides, I really need my wife to come out because I want to show off how good looking she is. She's super good looking. And everybody's like, yeah, party, man. Let's bring out the queen. Queen's name is Vashti. You don't get to do anything with Vashti. You just have to listen. And Vashti she's very beautiful, but she also has something that's really important called self-respect. And so when the king comes and says, hey, you need to come out and walk and show off your good looks to all my drunk buddies over here, she's like, heck no, I don't think so. I'm not doing that, which is a problem. The noblemen surrounding Xerxes begin to get upset. She just refused the edict of the king. The queen did. And if the queen can do that to the king, surely every other wife that he rules over can now do that to their husbands, not to mention just the blatant disrespect for authority. And so they come up with the plan. Hey, you should banish Vashti for the rest of her life, to never ever come into your presence again. She'll never be brought before you. And so the king agrees. Yeah, I don't like her anyway. So he banishes her and she's gone. Now, after that happens, he goes out to war, and that's when he goes and fights those two previous battles that we talked about. And when he comes back after his great victory and after his bummer defeat, he's kind of sitting on his throne and kind of just digging being king. I would imagine that'd be a cool position to have ish. And he begins to remember what he's done to Vashti. And he probably begins to remember that he wants someone in his life, but he can't really go back on his decree. That wouldn't look very good. He still needs a queen. So he comes up with a plan. He decides, I'm going to go and have all of my men go out and grab all of the beautiful virgins over all of the regions that I rule over, and I'm going to use them to enlarge my harem, and then one of them will become my queen. So he's expanding his palace, he's expanding his lineage, he's expanding his power by enlarging a harem and then finding a queen at the same time. And a decree is then sent out. And if you were a beautiful virgin, you had been chosen to be part of Xerxes' harem. And then one of those members would get to be queen. And some would kind of represent this stage of the book. It's kind of like a beauty contest. I've heard that a lot. And I think that's largely to kind of like take the creepiness out of it. And there were aspects that this is kind of a beauty contest in a way. There are similar elements, but it's much more serious. The harem would be a household of women that the king would have right to do anything he wanted with. He could sleep with them whenever he wanted, disregard them however he wanted. They were just there for his sole pleasure, to do with as he pleased, and they had no option to say no. Yeah, they were, in a sense, taken care of financially. They were set in that regards, unless they upset the king. So they had that for the rest of their lives, but they were still less than the queen. And there may have been some honor attributed to being part of the harem of the king, but definitely not the highest honor, and often against their will. And so, in my mind, this decree goes out, and really, you don't want to be summoned. You're a young woman pulled away from your family to go sleep with a man that you've never met, and you have no option whether you can say no or not. In chapter 2, verse 5, it picks up after this edict goes out. Now, there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai. That was real good, guys. The son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. Oh, well, that makes sense. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther. Yeah, she's great. The daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her in. That was close. As his own daughter. You guys really got to stay on it. This is a great way to ensure that everybody's paying attention too. Because if you don't cheer, I'm going to know you weren't listening. So the ladies come together and they're gathered. Esther is beautiful. Good job. And she's summoned by the decree. She's chosen to be part of the harem, and Mordecai is worried about her. So every day he walks in front of the courts when she's moved into the harem, and he's walking around and kind of checking on her, making sure she's doing well, which is both super endearing but really creepy at the same time. I mean, Mordecai loves Esther. Oh, yeah, huh? That was a doozy. He loves her. He wants to make sure she's doing all right. But at the same time, he's also the creepy guy hanging around the harem. Just kind of outside the courts, looking in the windows. How you guys doing? Is my niece in there? I don't know. I just feel like you don't want to be that guy. So Mordecai's, checking in on her and looking. And as time goes on, Esther meets the king and really impresses him. It's It's not just about the way she looks, but they meet and connect on a level that was relatively unexpected. And by the end of chapter 2, Esther is the new queen. And that is the finish of the first section of the book, the Feast of Kings. So now we enter into the Feasts of Esther. Chapter 2, verses 19 through 23. Chapter 2, 19 through 23. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred of her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai, just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan, can we stop there? The cat's name is Bigthan. His brother's Little Thin. His uncle's Not So Thin. Just bad name. Anyway, Bigthan, that's awesome. It's like Darkon from earlier in the book. One person remembers Darkon. And Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. That took a real hard left. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Mordecai discovers a plot to kill the king. The story's building. We've got some weight to it now. The plot's beginning to thicken, and these guards are upset with the king, and they're hanging out, and it's overheard. We're going to kill the king. And so he comes in and fills in Esther. And Esther tells the king. And it ends up that Mordecai saves his life. Now, this is important to remember because it's going to come back up in the story. Just that one little blurb is going to change the entire direction of the book. So highlight that, underline it, circle it, put your grogger on it, whatever you have to do to remember that part. It goes on in chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. One guy. Who shouted out that first? You're an elder. You don't count. You can have a hamantashen first. By the way, we have 3 types of hamantashen. This is a parentheses. It's like a break in movie. Michelle's hamantashen of glory. Then we have the hamantashen that I made, which is not disgusting. And then we have what I'm going to call oopsatashen. I was supposed to make 50. I ended up making around 100 because I destroyed them like crazy. They taste the same. They're just weird looking. Anyway, feel free to grab a hamantashen. I forgot where I was. Oh, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded them. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. So weight is being offered. We have this new guy in power, and his name is Haman. And he's promoted, and people are supposed to bow down, supposed to give him respect and recognize his glory. But Mordecai will not, because he is a Jew. And he's going to obey the Torah, period. He worships God and worships him alone, and he only bows down to God. So when Haman passes by, Mordecai refuses. And this infuriates Haman. He's really upset. I mean, who is this Jew that he does not bow down? And this anger toward Mordecai brings to light an even larger issue. Haman hates all the Jews. He wants them all dead. He wants them exterminated. He wants them gone. Oh, how history repeats itself. And so he comes up with a plan to kill all the Jews. And he presents it to Xerxes with an offer of 10,000 talents to the one who carries it out. So let me give you some gravity on what he's actually offering. A talent is about 75 pounds of silver. So he's offering 10,000 talents of silver. A talent of silver is roughly 9 years of wages. So Haman offers up to 90. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. That was very good though. That was intense. Haman, oh man, I just did it again. This bad cat offers up to 90,000 years' wages for the extermination of the Jews. And Xerxes listens to him and agrees to Haman's plan. That's better. And this is where Xerxes shoots himself in the foot. His wife is Jewish, and he doesn't know it, which I feel like, how do you not know that? That's like third date material. Hey, are you Jewish? Yeah, totally. Oh, I'm King Xerxes. But he just apparently failed to hit that part of her entire existence. And so he agrees with the decree. Look at chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. The decree goes out, and the date is set. The Jews will die. Posts are created all over his cities and all over his towns. His army sends them out, and they recognize, man, what are we going to do? The Jewish people do, and they begin to weep, and they begin to mourn and fast. And Mordecai puts on sackcloth and covers himself with ashes, and he mourns in the center of town with his people. And after a period of mourning, he then goes to fill in Esther. Oh, you guys messed up. He goes to fill in Esther on what's going on. And he tells her to go and plead with the king not to do this. And it's a really good plan. It's a smart plan. She has the king's ear. She's the best advocate that they have. But she comes face to face with the problem. She's not allowed to approach the king unless he calls her. And he hasn't done that in 30 days. And so if she goes before the king without his permission, it's death, or at least the same fate as Vashti. Chapter 4, verses 13 through 17 says, Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, Do not think to yourself that the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days or nights. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything that Esther had ordered him. This is amazing. Think about the pressure that Esther's under. This is a life and death situation. And she comes in and says, I'm going to risk my life for the sake of all these people. People I don't know, people that I do know, people that are just related to me somehow. I will go before the king. I may not accomplish anything, but it seems to me, though, that God has placed me here in this time, at this moment, for this purpose. And I think it's important for us not to miss the courage of this moment. She's willing to sacrifice her life for the lives of her people, and very well knows that it might not work. Chapter 5, verses 1 through 5 says, On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. Thank you for all those details. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. Yay. And he held out the tip of his scepter, and the king said to her, What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even to half of my kingdom. And Esther said, If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman, yeah, man, bad cat over here, come today to a feast that I've prepared for the king. Then the king said, Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. Esther's in the courts, and the king holds out his scepter, and she can approach him, and she invites the king and Haman to a dinner. Remember, the king likes feasting. We've learned this earlier. This was the demise of Vashti, the kind of preparation for whomping the Spartans, and this is This is his go-to. I want to party. And Esther knows that. You guys missed one. There you go. Come on, Esther. I feel like you guys are burning out. It's like running a marathon, just a really loud one. And so she invites these guys to dinner. She's going to use his feasting and his drinking to her advantage. And she has the dinner, and this moment, this is her opportunity. And as they're sitting around and feasting and talking, she doesn't tell Xerxes the plot. So basically, they just have a nice dinner. The Jews are still in danger, and she knows that, and she knows that she needs to tell the king what's happening. So she invites them back for a second, and they agree. Now Haman, he's stoked. I mean, the bro was happy. He just got invited to eat with the king and the queen, and I'm sure the food was delicious, and it went really well, and so he's kind of walking on cloud nine, and then he gets invited back again. 2 dinners. Happy day. That's 2 free meals. I love that. And so here we got one. Yeah, he's like, my grogger. So Haman's stoked. And as he goes home after this amazing night, he passes by Mordecai. And Mordecai does not bow down. Dun, dun, dun. Nailed it. And the dude is angry. He arrives home and he complains to his wife for like 19 verses. And then decides, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a gallows and I'm going to hang Mordecai. And yeah, that's kind of a bad yay, huh? Should have thought about that ahead of time. And the gallows he builds are 50 cubits or 7 stories high. He's going to make an example of this man. Meanwhile, that night, Xerxes can't sleep. He's just tossing and turning, and maybe the food upset him. I don't know. I don't know if Esther was a good cook or not. And so he can't sleep, and he remembers, man, hey, there was a plot in my life, like way back when. Whatever happened with that? Who told us what was going on? And he remembers the plot, and he does some research, and he finds out it's Mordecai who saves his life. So now Mordecai is in an interesting position because his life is threatened by the king and by Haman. Haman's really upset with him and wants him to be hung, and the king is stoked about him and wants to honor him. The next morning, the king calls Haman and asks him what should be done to the person who the king is pleased with. And Haman thinks it's him. He's thinking, man, I just had dinner with them. I got invited to another dinner with them. He really, really likes me. I'm pretty sure he wants to honor me. And so as he's talking to Xerxes about what should happen to a man that the king delights in, he comes up with this plan. And Esther, chapter 6, verses 7 through 9. Chapter 6, 7 through 9. It says, and Haman said to himself, who would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. This is Haman's dream. It's kind of a dumb dream, if I'm honest. I read that, I'm like, really? That's what you're shooting for? Like, I would have wanted another free meal, but you want to ride a horse? But this is Haman's dream. I want power. I want to be recognized. I want respect. I want to be honored. I want to be treated like a king. Xerxes is like, all right, I'm cool with that. That's a good plan. Do that to Mordecai. You have to walk Mordecai around the city, and you have to announce him, and he gets to wear my robes and my crown. It was a bummer day for Haman. But he obeys the king. This is his worst nightmare. He's completely humiliated, which is kind of awesome for us, not so much for him, but it's part of the story. And so he's walking around the man who refused to bow to him, the man whom he's building gallows for, he now has to honor. And that night, after this horrible day for Haman happens, on it, Esther holds her second dinner. And they gather together, Esther and Haman and the king, and they're eating and hanging out and feasting, and she just kind of blurts it out. I'm Jewish. And Haman's trying to kill me. And all my family. Yeah, that's a boo moment, I feel like, and an oh moment. And the king, Xerxes, is like, oh, this is heavy, bro. Said that in the Hebrew. And he doesn't, really know how to control his rage right now. So he walks out of the room to cool off, which is bad husband move. Hey, this guy wants to kill me and my family. I need a moment. I'm going to go to the bathroom for a while. But he leaves. And Haman's in trouble. And he doesn't know what to do. And he's terrified. He just realized that he's attempting to kill the queen, which is no go with Xerxes. And so what he does as Esther is sitting, reclining on the couch, and he's standing next to her, he begins to plead and beg, but his pleading gets more and more intense, and he falls on top of her, just begging for mercy. And then that exact moment, Xerxes walks in. Super uncomfortable. And it looks like Haman's trying to kill her. And the king wigs out. Immediately, he has Haman hung on the gallows. You guys forgot Haman. There you go. Immediately, he has him hung on the gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And then he reverses his decree to have the Jewish people killed, sets them free. Yeah. And that closes the Feast of Esther and brings us to the last section, the Feast of Purim. Esther chapter 9, verses 20 through 22. Esther saves the Jews. Mordecai is given Haman's old position. And the Jews are given the right to defend themselves and fight anyone who threatens them. And that gets a little crazy in chapter 9. Maybe a little too far, but we'll get there one day. We just have to finish John first. And so the Jews are given the right to defend themselves and fight anyone who threatens them. And then we find the very first Feast of Purim, chapter 9, verses 20 through 22. And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and also the 15th day of the same year by year, as the days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days of sending gifts of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. This is how the Feast of Purim started. The point or theme of Esther is God's providence. The name of God is actually never mentioned in the book of Esther. Come on, guys. And but the themes, and you can see his hand moving so clearly that there was no doubt. This is God working. He's always working. He's always leading. He's always guiding. And you're never alone to carry out what he has placed you here to do. What we learn about Esther is that your birth, your family, the time in which you were born was not an accident. This is the beautiful idea of providence. This is the beautiful idea that God has distinctly created you and placed you within history at this exact moment for a purpose. You're special. But what we also learn about Esther is she showed up. She did what was required of her. She didn't just lament, well, I don't have to do these things. I deserve this new life. I don't want to step out of the box. This seems like it could be dangerous. She said, I'm going to sacrifice for the people of God. I'm going to sacrifice for the furthering of God's kingdom. She showed up and worked. She got it done. We've been created specifically to be a part of God's plan, but we must act in that plan. And we celebrate the Feast of Purim to remember that even though our calling sometimes seems impossible, even though life seems overwhelming, even though the cards are stacked against us, God is continually working. And it is our joy to be a part of it. Haman. Just want to see what would happen. That's the end of the book of Esther. We really killed it, man. I mean, we did that so fast. I'm really proud of myself. So I'm going to pray. We're going to bring up the worship team, and then we'll feast. My wife, well, I'll tell you afterwards. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for giving us the ability as your family to celebrate these awesome things, to do it uniquely in our own way. Thank you for the book of Esther. I didn't know what you guys are going to do with that. Thank you for what we can learn from it, and for always leading, for always being with us, even when we feel like you're not there. Just like in this book, your name is never mentioned. And sometimes we feel like we can't hear you, but you're there and you're working. You're orchestrating, your hand is moving. And Lord, I ask that each and every one of us would deeply recognize the importance of why we're where we're at now, that you have something for us to do, but Father, also that we would act on that we would follow and risk and sacrifice for the furtherance of your kingdom. We thank you for fun church services where we can just act out and be obnoxious. And we thank you for the community we're going to experience and the worship that we get to do right now. In your name, amen. Even though